Welcome to APD iConnect. Create WSC SAN assessment and add supporting documents. The SAN assessment is a form in APD iConnect that includes information required by the iBudget rule and handbook to submit a SAN request. The WSC will log into APD iConnect in the WSC CDC role and access the consumer record by putting the information in the quick search. To complete the SAN assessment, the WSC will click into the SAN tab, access the SAN that is currently being completed, and you'll notice the tabs on the side of the SAN details. Click on the SAN Assessments tab, File, Add SAN Assessment, and you'll notice that the header will populate with the WSC's name. The review date will be the date of entry, and the status is going to be draft. The SAN assessment should stay in a draft status until the WSC has completed all of the information before submitting the SAN request. Leaving the SAN assessment in a draft status makes it editable. The WSC can come back, enter more information, add more supporting documentation. Ultimately, when completed, the SAN assessment must be in a complete status. You want to choose this type, which is WSC SAN request. And the form will populate. The WSC will proceed to complete the form, again, leaving it in draft status until everything is completely done. You'll notice throughout the form is what we call conditional logic. When you answer a question, if there are other questions that have to be answered based on what you put in, conditional logic will appear. So under WSC processing, for instance, if there are behaviors that are associated with the need for the SAN request, when you click yes, the conditional logic will appear asking you for more details. However, if it is not and you click no, then the conditional logic does not appear. The significant additional needs documentation. The next section is a checkpoint for all submissions. This is the section where the WSC will confirm that they have done their due diligence to address the consumer's needs prior to submitting the SAN request. You choose what is appropriate. The next section is significant additional needs criteria. The first question is a required question, and it says that this requirement will be satisfied when a reason for the SAN request is selected from the list below. Once you choose why you're submitting the SAN, by clicking in the appropriate box, that required field or question disappears. The WSC will proceed to check all of the necessary parts, providing all of the necessary requirements throughout the SAN process. The last section is service-specific documentation requirements, and this is based on what service is needed and the documents that are required for that service. In this instance, as an example, if we were choosing adult dental services, it shows that an invoice or treatment plan listing each procedure and negotiated cost is part of the requirement, the documentation. You'll notice under each documentation, it will ask you, how are you going to make sure that the reviewer has the documentation necessary to completely review the SAN request when it's received? Do you attach the documentation to a note? Is the documentation recorded in the consumer record as a consumer activity, or is it recorded as a consumer assessment? And each area has its own set of how the supporting documentation has to be added to the SAN request. You'll notice here, the only option is to attach the supporting documentation to a note. The WSC will complete the SAN assessment, leaving it in a draft status, file, save and close assessment, the WSC must acknowledge the documentation that is being attached in the service supporting documentation section of the WSC SAN assessment form. The WSC will create a note in APD iConnect to indicate where the record or the documentation can be found and or upload the supporting documentation as an attachment to a note. Click on the SAN Notes tab, File, Add a SAN Note. The note type is SAN. The note subtype is supporting documentation. The description is a summary of the documents. In the notes area, this is where the WSC will indicate any other details about the supporting documents. If the supporting documentation is already within the consumer record, the WSC will make sure that the notes are detailed, telling the reviewer where the supporting documentation can be found in the consumer record. For example, note dated July 1st, 2020, titled Specialty Assessments. If the WSC is attaching supporting documentation to this note, you would indicate the details in the notes area and attach the appropriate documents. In any instance, there is no need to add a note recipient because the reviewer will automatically look at all notes under the SAN notes when reviewing the SAN request. The WSC will file, save and close the SAN note, and the process of adding notes within the SAN will continue until all notes for all supporting documentation is indicated and ready to submit